Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to How to Rate a Super Great Biography for Your Senior Friends in the Moments to Remember project. Those senior friends are absolutely awesome, and they deserve a biography that's moving and memorable and meaningful and true. And this, my friends, is how you are going to do it. You're going to begin boldly. Then you'll get right to the point. Next, you will add some details, and finally, you'll tie it all together. We're going to look at each of those in a little bit more detail coming up right now. First, beginning boldly. This is what it means. It means you are going to think of the number one most incredible story that you heard from your senior friend. Do that right now. Think about the absolute most interesting story that they told you. Then you're going to start your story by telling that in an interesting way. Let's look at an example. This is one about a time when a guy named Mr. Roger got caught tipping cows over by a farmer and had a little bit of a dangerous encounter. Here's how I would tell it in an interesting way. Plop! The cow fell to the ground with a thud, and Mr. Rogers' friends all laughed. Just then, a bright light pierced the darkness. "Hey, you kids!" shouted the farmer. "What do you think you're doing?" The children all fell silent. In the quiet, they heard the sound of the farmer cocking his gun. So we pick that interesting moment, and then we tell that story in an interesting way. Here's another example. Mrs. Doreen is going to escape from England. She's going to escape running for her life. And here's how we tell that in an interesting way. The waves rocked the tiny boat as Mrs. Doreen peered into the distance. It had been 2 days and their supplies were running out. It was incredible to think that just 2 days before, they had been safe at home in England. Now they were on the run for their very lives. Tell your story in a way that's going to draw the readers in. Now, what if your story never escaped from England for their life? What if they've lived kind of a more normal existence? Well, even in the little things, you can find a way to tell the story in a way that's going to capture people and suck them into your story. Here's an example. Just a regular old little middle school dance. Here's how you'd tell it. This was it. The moment Mr. Mark had been waiting for. Good old Julianne Sue was right there, standing by the punch bowl, just waiting for someone to ask her to dance, and that someone would be him. He put on his best smile, caught her eye, and walked her way. And then she turned and ran off. And people wonder what's going to happen next, right? You want to pull those readers into that story. Begin boldly. Whatever you do at the beginning, you need to figure out which story is going to do the best job of capturing the reader's attention and start off with that. Next, get to the point. Figure out what kind of character your senior friend is and use that story to share your big idea. Let's look at some examples. In that story about Mr. Roger, you could go on to say, don't worry, spoiler alert, Mr. Roger survives. And he goes on to have many more crazy adventures because that's just the kind of person he is. A free spirit who's always willing to try new things and who sometimes forgets to think about the consequences. So tell your readers what kind of person Mr. Roger is. In the story about Mrs. Doreen escaping from England, you could say, over the course of her long and eventful life, things haven't always gone Mrs. Doreen's way. She has had her share of trouble, but she always comes out on top because that's who Mrs. Doreen is. A fighter with a spirit who never gives up. Tell your reader what kind of person your senior friend is. The one about the middle school dance, you could go on to say, Mr. Mark just laughed it off, and today, Julianne Sue and Mr. Mark have been married for over 40 years. She says that's the first thing she noticed about him. He doesn't take anything too seriously, and as you hear more about his life, I am sure you'll agree. So figure out, what does that important story tell about your character's life, and tell your readers all about it. So begin boldly, then get to the point. Tell the big idea about your senior friend. Next, we're going to add some details. When you add details, well, you want to tell more stories that help show that essential character of your senior friend. Make sure to include important events of their life, like their birth date and place. Work in things like major childhood events or education. Now, you don't just want to make a list of these things. You want to work them into stories that your readers will find interesting. Let's see what that looks like. We'll just dive into Mr. Roger a little bit more deeply. We could say something like this. For Mr. Roger, it all started shortly after he was born on July 2nd, 1939, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. When he was only 7 years old, he remembers getting into trouble for putting a live frog into a classmate's locker. He says that when the frog jumped out, she jumped even higher. So there's a story which connects with the big idea about Mr. Roger being kind of a free spirit, a prankster, a jokester. We tell a story about his life. We tell those important details, but we do it in a way that's very, very story oriented. Next paragraph, his mischief making ways continued when he got a job at General Electric. Although he always got his work done on time, his coworkers knew him as someone whose pranks you'd always have to watch out for. So again, we tell those important events about his life, but we do it in a way that connects with our big idea. Last paragraph, with his wife, Marie, however, it's anyone's guess who's the bigger jokester. She has been known to hide his reading glasses from time to time, even to this very day. Again, you connect, you talk about getting married to Marie, tell who his wife is, but you connect it again with that big idea. So a great biography would go on like that, talking about more of those different big life moments, things that you want to check off in their biography, and connecting them with the big theme. Think you can do that? Well, once you have done that, it is time to tie it all together. Here, you're going to finish your story with an excellent summary of what your senior friend is all about. And maybe reflect on what this experience, the experience of writing the biography, has taught you. Let's look at an example. Not all of us have the same spirit as Mr. Roger, but all of us can learn from his life. He's done great work and he's had fun doing it. I hope that as I live my life, I can remember not to take things too seriously, because that would be stupid. I think that's kind of a Mr. Roger way to end that story. Little weird joke. And then, of course, at the very end, I know students, elementary students, always like to finish their stories by saying the end. So feel free, do that right away at the end. There are the credits for the people who helped get the template for these slides presentations. And I hope that all of you, as you go through and write your senior friend's biography, can remember those big ideas. Begin boldly, then get to the point. Add details and tie it all together. Thanks and goodbye.